So, okay, shall I?
Yeah.
Can I run them? Okay.
I can recognize that. So you lead it.
I lead and
You're the king of rock and roll.
he's the king of rock and roll.
Okay.
You do the impresario.
Yeah.
Behind the music.
The man behind. The children is the morning he take it.
Well, you said one time it's iron spirit that. You do the animated spirit. All right, is everybody in? All right. Good, already improved, excellent.
Oh, we have a nice shoot.
It's amazing, so many names.
Sure.
People all over the place.
So Laura is here.
Well, excellent. So shall we begin? This is welcome to the next exciting episode of the Revelation Reception Network seminar. We're getting close to the end of our first season, but not before we have 3 more exciting talks starting today with Régis Burnet, who I will introduce in just a moment. Just want to thank everybody for joining, and it's very exciting to be having our second hybrid session here in the Beyond Canon Center in Regensburg, University of Regensburg in Bavaria. This is a center which has been kind enough to kind of partner with us and allow us to use this room and provide moral support and all kinds of wonderful things and food. Those of you who are online, we regret that you can't join us. Next time, fly. But anyway, I think we'll get started. I think at the end, I'll announce the 2 upcoming talks, one of which will be by Tobias Niklas, and then another one by Martina Verchesi from Glasgow. We'll talk more about that at the end, but for now, I'm going to introduce actually one of the co-founders of this group, Christian Cardozo, who is on the Zoom somewhere. And I and Régis started talking about a year ago about all the interesting conversations that were happening throughout scholarship around the world about the book of Revelation, about the apocalypse. And it just seemed like a time like we need to start talking. We need to get into the same room. We need to maybe coordinate informally. And within, I think, a few days, we had sent out invitations and put together a program. So it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Régis Burnet from Université Catholique de Louvain. He is the professor of New Testament there, and his name is known for a number of reasons to people in this room, because he really is talking about the 2 things that we're doing. He writes about the book of Revelation, and he writes about biblical reception. And this is really exactly what this group is about. So he is the seminar giver par excellence, and it's exciting to have him here. I just want to mention 2 books that he has written on these topics. First of all, in 2021, he wrote Exegesis and History of Reception, Reading the New Testament Today with Readers of the Past. This is 2021 from Morsiebeck. And then second, I think just a few days ago, Armageddon, une histoire de la fin du monde, my French is absolutely terrible, but A History of the End of the World, Armageddon. This was published, yeah, a few days ago. And so go buy it, everyone. So I think with this, I'll just hand the talk over to Régis, who will be presenting today on 666, a mirror of the interpretation of Revelation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you for being there, present and in the air. Anybody knows 666? It has been, in fact, an obsession of popular culture since 50 years. Several films refer to it, from the famous The Omen, starring Gregory Peck, to Pulp Fiction, which uses at the code for the famous briefcase. And in 1982, Iron Maiden released an album called The Number of the Beast. And there are countless novels, comics, and mangas that refer to this number. It is said, of course, to represent the devil. In face of such an onslaught, the exegetes are rather like wet blankets. With a certain unanimity, they claim that we do not need to look that far, because 666 is very simple. It's merely the code name deciphered by gematria for the Emperor Nero, Neron Xar, abbreviated form of Kaiser. Who decided it? It had to be this way? And what does it tell us about the general hermeneutical assumptions of those who adopt this reading? In this presentation, I would like to explore the idea that 666 is the mirror of commentators' exegetical options and question the direction in which recent options are pointing. First, Nero Kaiser as the apex of preterist exegesis. The invasion of Nero Kaiser interpretation can be dated precisely 1831. It spread rapidly, which proves that it corresponded perfectly to a horizon of expectation, that of preterist exegesis. The invention of the hypothesis to read the name of the Emperor Nero in the mark of the beast was the subject of a small debate in the 1830s. The first to defend it was Karl Friedrich August Fritzsche, ordentlicher Professor der Theologie in Rostock, who in an article in 1831 proposed to read 666 as Kaiser Neron. And apparently the article was not widely read because around 1836, 3 other researchers were vying for the primacy of the idea. The first was a young researcher, Franz Ferdinand Benary, who was an assistant professor in Berlin. He proposed 2 readings, Neron Xar for 666 and Nero Xar for 616, the other possible reading inspired by Latin manuscripts. But now the debate heats up. Ferdinand Hitzig claims that Benary stole the idea from him, which he had developed during a summer seminary Benary has attended. And Edward Royce claimed that he was the first to have the idea, and that Benary had also attended his seminary. And 40 years later, he maintains in his French commentary that he was the first to have the idea. It seems that the devil, overjoyed that his name has finally been clarified, has driven our dear colleagues mad. From then on, it spread rapidly through all commentaries. It was enthusiastically adopted across the Atlantic by Moses Stuart, discussed at length in Germany by De Wet, who eventually returned to a more traditional option, followed by Dusterdick, and finally canonized by Bousset. Today, it is the most common interpretation. The reason for this success is easy to explain. It prohibits all efforts to read contemporary events with 666. To understand this, let us go back to the American Moses Stuart, who is perfectly clear in that respect. A professor at Andover Theological Seminary, Stuart was a Puritan, a Congregationalist, and a revivalist. But despite his pietist roots, he is a man of the 19th century, marked by the historical critical turn. In spite of his admiration for the great pietist master Wenger, which he clearly repeats, he cannot help ridiculing the solution proposed by the pietists on the previous century. For Wenger, 666 years was the length of the reign of the beast, which would end in 1810. Noting with some irony the failure of the prediction, Stuart asks himself, how could the first century writer have thought of this? And he agrees with Benary. The weight of the historical option is such that it justifies breaking with his own tradition. The claim that the beast is a man from the past destroys any attempt to a futuristic reading. Indeed, the entire chronology of the second part of the text, which has always been equated with earthly events, revolves around the beast. It is born from the earth, begins the persecution by casting out its unclean spirits, is bound for the millennium, and is finally thrown into the lake of sulfur. These various events have been used to calculate periods in human history. To claim that the figure belongs to the past radically condemns any attempt to project events into the future. If we want to claim that the apocalypse concerns our present, we have to make a considerable hermeneutical effort, which consists in transposing issues from the past into the present. We cannot read it as pure prophecy. Let us go a step further. The beast is not only useful within the chronology, but also is at the heart of the meaning of the narrative, since it's one of the main protagonists. What is the second part of the text? I mean, the second part of Apocalypse. A battle between a well-known, clearly identified figure, the Lamb, and three more mysterious figures, the dragon and the two beasts. And this quarter, you know that, fights by proxy. While the identity of the dragon is given by the author, it's Saturn, that of the beasts is open to interpretation. Throughout his history, it has thus received various identifications. A lot of characters from the past or from the future were identified to the beast. It thus involves the whole hermeneutic of the text. In turn, the identification of the number 666, which reveals it, reflect this hermeneutics as a brief excursion into history will show. Tell me how you interpret 666, and I will tell you who you are. It is quite likely that the first commentators of Revelation promoted a futurist exegesis, since the first commentaries we possess try to resist this reading. This is clearly the case with Irenaeus of Lyon, whose discourse on 666 shows that he resists to identify the figure with characters from the future. If he maintains that the coming of the beast, which he identifies with the Antichrist, will take place in the future, which makes him a futurist, he seems to withstand the excesses of interpretations. He therefore proposed provisional solutions based on gematria, all of which are characterized by a high degree of generality. He offers three: Eantas, which is hardly identified anymore. Lateinos, which echoes the Roman Empire in general, and thus function as a kind of tautology. The beast he has identified with Rome says that is a Latin beast. And also Teitan, which is a bit of mystery, but which the diphthong minus still very much recalls the monster Titan. So it's another tautology. This use of tautology is quite subtle, seemingly interpreting something. Irenaeus provides no additional information. This is the very nature of a tautology, to restate an identity or a definition. And so he puts an end to the interpretation. His final formula reinforced the very refusal to interpret. I quote, it's in Adversus Hereses. However, we will not risk our fortune on this interpretation, nor declare peremptorily that the Antichrist will bear this name, knowing that if his name were to be openly proclaimed now, it would have been disclosed by the one who have seen the apocalypse. The other solution is to interpret charagma according to its true meaning. It has the sign. The mark is a set of numbers, but it is first and foremost a mark, charagma. This is the elegant solution of Tychonius, who understands the number as a set of signs that can be combined to form a new symbolic sign. I quote, 616, so he's using 616, 660 is written like this, K-E-S. Separately, these characters are a cipher. Joined together to form a monogram, they are both a mark and a name and a cipher. In other words, Tychonius, whose lesson is 616, sees the combination of this number as the monogram of Christ. Roger Grison proposes a reconstruction from Latin similar to a keyhole. It's the first sign on the left. But we might ask ourselves whether we could not think in Greek alphabet with a lunar sigma. And so we get a prism, but if we reverse the sigma, we get a sort of unsuccessful monogram, and it's the monogram at the right. Indeed, the meaning of this monogram is revealed in what follows, according Tychonius. In this sign, we recognize Christ and symbolically represent him whom the church truly honors and whom the opposing power strives to resemble. It's a sort of mirror, but a sort of the mirror is not perfect because it's made by the demon. Whether through the use of tautology or through the use of the monogram, the result of this interpretation is clear. It prohibits any lectura clé of the apocalypse. It's impossible to recognize a real character under the figure of the beast, who remains a pure figure of evil. And this ingenious solution lasted for 1,000 years until the return of an exegesis that treats the text as a roadmap for the future. It's the preterist exegesis. For a long time, I missed one slide. Okay. But don't worry. For a long time, I wondered what might have given rise to the preterist exegesis that flourished in the Middle Ages, particularly, of course, in the work of one of the most influential commentators of the time, Nicolas of Lyra. The main principle is that the reader's historical situation stands in the middle of the apocalyptic narrative. Some of the events have already taken place, but another part is yet to come. To explain this complete paradigm shift in the reading of the apocalypse, we often think of Joachim of Fiora, who is said to have initiated this reading with the famous theory of the 3 ages. It is possible that his theory influenced the reading, but it does not explain the obsession that this reading manifests in the Middle Ages, the reconquest of the Holy Land. Thanks to this paper, I think I have the solution. It was a Pope, Innocent III, who initiated this reading. In his bull, Quia Major, which called for the 5th Crusade, he wrote, I quote, "Until the time of Blessed Gregory, Christian peoples ruled almost all the Saracen, it's Islamic provinces. But since then, a son of perdition has arisen, the false prophet Mohammed, who had led many people away from the truth by worldly temptations and the pleasures of the flesh. Although his perfidy has prevailed to this day, we put our trust in the Lord, who has already given us a sign that good things are to come, that the end of this beast is near, whose number, according to the Apocalypse of St. John, will be completed in 666 years, of which nearly 600 have already passed. The revolution is complete. 666 is therefore not interpreted as a code, but as a number for counting years. If we count from the Hejira and add 600, we arrive at 1222, which explains why the Pope declares that almost 60 years have passed in the reign of this false prophet. And if we take the Pope's reasoning to its logical conclusion, the end of time should have come in 1288. Nicholas of Lyra, who wrote after this date, had merely adapted the Pope's intuitions. The Protestants, who were heirs of the Middle Ages more than they care to admit, simply took this way of counting and adapted it to their own purposes. This is exactly what Bullinger does when he embarks on a long history of the Church and finally arrives to a conclusion. 666, to which we add the date of the writing, 95, the writing of the book, puts us right in the heart of the Carolingian era, when the papacy began to exercise its dictatorial power. The Antichrist is therefore the Pope of Rome, and his various demonic emanations are his legates. As Irena Bacchus has shown in her major book on Reformed readings of Revelations, the first Protestant commentators to use this reading of the papal Antichrist did so with the benefit of insight for polemical purposes. For them, the Pope was not really the Antichrist. But saying so was so exciting in a controversy. The second generation, on the other hand, took the identification literally. A particularly interesting case of this literal exegesis is the interpretation of Andreas Helwig, a German philologist who was rector of the University of Berlin. In his Antichristus Romanus of 1618, using all his scientific knowledge, he proposed to read in 666 the expression vicarius filii Dei, so the vicar of the Son of God, which is the title of the Pope, which is found in the donation of Constantine. This proposal went somewhat unnoticed until the French Revolution, according to a book from Leroy Edwin Froude, and then gained ground in revivalist church circles. We can mention, for instance, one of the founders of Adventism, Ellen White, who claimed that the mark of the beast would be to change the Sabbath to Sunday by Catholics. Ellen White does not appear to have stated that Vicarius Filii Dei should be read in 666, but many Adventist publications did, such as Uriah Smith and Francis Nicol. It seems that the proposal has been abandoned in recent Adventist exegesis. It is often said that this reading, there was a change. You can see the Pope. Okay. It is often said that this reading is a return to literalism and an effect of sola scriptura. The continuity of this reading from the Middle Ages to the present speaks against such a simplification. What the preterito-futurist reading expresses is above all a political ambition. By asserting that is it possible to recognize real characters beneath the figures present in the text, we not only assert that the narrative of the Book of Revelation is on its way through history, we also interpret human groups according to a reading key that classifies them as supporters and opponents to God's plan. This is politics at its most extreme, Gott mit uns politics, where divinity is instrumentalized in the service of human aspiration. Let's have a look at those who still practice it. It is no insult to say that Darbyist evangelical movements are literalists. Many of them claim that adjective. But if we look at those at the heart of this movement, we can say that they do not practice this political reading. Take, for example, the Bible commentary edited by John F. Walwood at Dallas Theological Seminary. We cannot say it is not representative of evangelicalism. Not only is Dallas Theological Seminary a kind of Vatican of Darbyism, but Walwood is in the direct lineage of Darby. Darby had Moody as his disciple, who had Scofield as his disciple, who had Chafer as his disciple, the founder of Dallas Theological Seminary, who had Walwood as his disciple. And what do we read from Walwood's own pen? Probably, I quote, the best interpretation is that the number 6 is one less than the perfect number 7. And the threefold repetitions of the 6 would indicate that for all their pretensions to deity, Satan and the two beasts were just creatures and not the creator. To put it in other words, true Darbyists resist to identify actual persons, but political Darbyists don't. On the other hand, as Paul Boyer shows in his study of political evangelicalism, the 1950s saw the emergence of many people that took Darby's concept of the rapture in a political sense, with a Manichaean vision of America and world politics. This was the beginning of a political evangelicalism. They quickly identified anti-Christian figures, Moshe Dayan, Anwar al-Sadat, John Kennedy, Henry Kissinger, as the beast. In Al Lindsey's million-selling prophecy, 666 is the number of a European leader by which the Antichrist is to be recognized. This idea is reflected in political novels such as Dan Betzer, in which the great leader is the Frenchman Jacques Catroux, Président de l'Union Européenne, or Tim LaHaye's, in which the Antichrist is Nicolae Carpathia, whose mentor is the Russian Satanist Viv Ivins, V-I 6 in Roman, V666 in Roman numerals. Salem Kirban's famous novel is a little different, but just as revealing. 666 is the name of an Iraqi born at 6 p.m. on the 6th June. Conclusion and opening. Tell me how you interpret the number of the beast, and I will tell you who you are. If we put what we have just discovered back in chronological order, it becomes clear that the history of readings of the number 666 closely follows the history of readings of the text of Revelation. The Lateinos hypothesis corresponds perfectly to a symbolic reading that was practiced throughout antiquity and right up to the modern times. From the 12th century onwards, it competed with the preterito-futurist readings, which successively attribute the figure to the beast, to Mohammed, the Pope, and more recently to political repulsive figure. Finally, the historical critical reading has sought to put an end to these polemical readings and try to put everything back into the past. To conclude this reflection on the role of 666 as the mirror of our interpretations, I would like us to ask ourselves what our current interpretation is. What strikes me more and more is the gradual abandonment of the narrow hypothesis in favor of a return to a more symbolic reading. To demonstrate this, I would like to refer to recent commentaries. Lightheart in 2018, finds in 666 a reference to the first book of Kings, chapter 10, that states the number of talents, money, Solomon imports each year, in which he sees the beginning of his idolatry. He concludes, perhaps the beast does not have to invent a new mark at all. Perhaps the temple elites are so corrected by the beasts and harlot that their pre-existing marks are transformed into marks of apostasy. Clearly, the historical reference is still there, but it has become much more general. David de Silva and Amos Young in 21 take up Bockham's suggestion to read the Greek word terion, beast in Greek, transliterated into Hebrew. It is a paradoxical return to the tautological reading. The number of the beast itself is the common name of the beast. Tunstall, after recalling the classical hypothesis of Nero Caesar, takes up the idea of a kind of trinity of deficiency, I quote, 3 times the number 6 of imperfection, 7 minus 1. In his monumental commentary, Klaus Berger recalls the Neron-Caesar option, but immediately destroys it by saying that it would work just as well with the name of the emperor Nerva, Marcus M. Nerva, and it's 666. He concludes, denn der Verfasser betreibt kein Wahrsagerei, sondern Entwurfmechanismen, die in jedem Ernstfall gelten können. Und davon gibt es im Verlauf der Geschichte bekanntlich viele. The author does not attempt to tell fortunes, but rather outlines mechanisms that can be applied in any serious case, and there have been many throughout history. In this, he joins the last great commentary published in French by Jean Delorme, who said, le texte dessine une figure qui dépasse le gabarit de n'importe quel personnage ou régime tyrannique, passé ou présent. Cette figure garde toute sa capacité de rendre attentif aux forces de perversion qui s'exercent sournoisement dans la société à toute époque. The text draws a figure that transcends the scale of any character or tyrannical regime, past or present. This figure retains all its capacity to draw attention to the force the forces of perversion that insidiously operate in society in every age. I see this shift as a general movement of interpretation. I still hesitate to characterize it. On the one hand, it can be interpreted as a kind of wariness with the endless hypothesis of historical critical exegesis, a kind of caution and retreat in the face of the historical method's claim to tell the truth. On the other hand, it can also be seen as a kind of triumph of situated exegesis, which no longer seeks so much to reconstruct the author's intentions or what the first listener might have understood by listening to the author, but rather tries to reflect on the effects produced on the reader. I will try a final, more sociological approach. Churches are in crisis, and mine, the Catholic Church, perhaps more than any other. Knowing this, and whether consciously or unconsciously, interpreters may try to focus on what is essential, what is at the heart of the message, theology. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this talk, which gives us a tour of 666 for about 2,000 years, or just less than it. And I think there's a lot of basis for a lot of conversation here. So we enter into about 15, 20 minutes of question and answer period, or dialogue, conversation, as the case may be. And so go ahead and raise your hands either here or online, and we will do our best to spot you if you're online. Raise your virtual hand, and then we will get to you. If there's no questions to start, I just wanted to ask a general question, and that is, to what extent are these interpreters of the number of the beast of 666 or 616, to what extent are they referring back to previous interpretation? And to what extent are they elaborating, are they going in new directions? In other words, in the Middle Ages or with the Protestant Reformation, do you see a lot of deeper engagement with patristic text or with medieval text?
Yeah.
Or do you see completely new directions emerging, and how are they substantiating their readings?
That's interesting because I can take the example of medieval interpretation. You know how the glossa ordinaria works. You have the glossa with all the references to previous patristic commentaries, and you have the Nicholas of Lyra interpretation, often with the word moralité. It means to a moral sense, and there is a sort of a difference between a kind of they repeat the old patristic evidences, and they interpret the text utterly differently. Mm-hmm. But completely differently. Mm-hmm. And for instance, Nicholas of Lyra has makes no reference to the patristic commentaries. Mm-hmm. And you know how our historical critical exegesis works. The first commentaries of the 19th century repeat the patristic evidences and say it's patristic, so it's not interesting. And I can tell that 666, I know that 666 is Nero Caesar. Yes. That it was in the 19th century. And then you know how it works. Bousset or I don't know, Charles make the commentary, and everyone repeats the interpretation. And at the end of the day, I mean, at the end of the century, at the end of the 19th century, people say, "Oh yes, we just remember that it wasn't like that in the previous ages, but we are still right to say that 666 is Kaiser Nero. It's simply you can repeat the previous interpretation,
Yeah.
and you do nothing with that.
We have a question here from Christian. From
Hello, Christian.
Medellin. Could you unmute yourself?
No, it's, should be fine.
Okay.
Actually, it should be fine.
Hold on a second.
I cannot hear you.
It's
Is
audible?
No,
It's
moving.
not first, but
We cannot hear you.
I'd like to unshare.
No, it's the.
Yes, but I would like to unshare the screen.
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, if you do not want to like refer to any pictures, then.
Yeah, Christian, we still can't hear you. It's frustrating.
Maybe you can just write it in the chat and
Yeah,
we can
right,
just
yeah,
read it.
write it in the chat. and then-
perhaps I can ask you a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Thomas stops.
Yeah, so that he has time to fix his problem.
Thank you for your
Yeah,
patience.
found it very informative, very beautiful overview. I have two questions. The first one is regarding your you get a Marian approach.
Mhm.
I really love your work that you've done.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering, well, the overview that you give now, from a Gadamerian perspective, it would be interesting to know about these four Verständnisse, these three understandings of whatever type there may be that could explain these interpretations. And because you have this, if I understood you correctly, you have the ancient neo-interpretation that we call the first reader. A lot of scholars argue that. Then you have this symbolic one, and then you have this futuristic one.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what type of three understandings could explain these different exegeses. And corresponding to this question is, of course, what Gadamer calls the other hermeneutical, polar, the other hermeneutical pole, namely the side of the text. What does these assumptions say about the otherness of the text and about the exegesis of the text now? That means, how would you combine Wirkungsgeschichte with exegesis? And the second question,
The second question is a bit difficult. The first question is for me very interesting because for me the problem, sorry to say that to Gadamer, not the problem, but the difficulty of a Gadamerian perspective is that it didn't think about the shift in interpretations. When you read Gadamer, you have the impression, you got the impression that the interpretation is a continuum, and it's more or less the same interpretation, which is enriched by every century, every reading, and so on. And it's normal because Gadamer is has drawn from Hegel, and for Hegel, the revelation of the truth is a sort of continuum. There is one truth which is revealed throughout history, but there is, for me, there is shifts in interpretation, and I'm not sure that we can use Gadamer to think these shifts correctly. I'm sorry to say that to Gadamer because it's not. But I don't know if you agree with me. The idea that for Gadamer, it's the famous comparison of the thing you throw in a lake and there is a wave. when you think like that, when you throw a stone in a lake, there is no break in the waves. No, it's like the same stone and the same wave, which is expanding. So I'm not sure that we can use a Gadamerian perspective to interpret correctly the go and forth, back and forth of the exegesis. But it's only an impression. The second question, we need a seminary. We need maybe because it's no, I don't know how to. Maybe you have an idea for the second question you ask.
I have what?
An idea to because
About Wirkungsgeschichte and
Well,
exegesis.
I guess, in a sense, if you could explain, situate, and contextualize these different interpretations, if you, in a very crude way, you could explain which assumptions, they actually, which they are driven by, which assumptions, not just their political agendas,
yes,
but more, what explains, for instance, this futuristic, and what explains the symbolic one? Is it just a matter of reading into it, or do you need a certain pre-understanding of time, of I don't know, whatever? And if you understand these different assumptions, you also become more aware, I think, of the exegetical otherness of the text, the autoriteit, that Gadamer calls, in the sense that it allows you to see that we're standing in a tradition, which is co-determined, as Gadamer would say, by these different assumptions. But at the same time, by achieving this wirkungsgeschichtliches Bewusstsein, we also realize that we are prejudiced, and at the same time we could see the otherness of the text, that it's what you said yourself, the metaphor, that it says something about ourselves, and at the same time that reveals that the text says something differently as well.
yes.
So it's kind of like like you realize your own horizon, and that enables you to go beyond it. But I guess that's theoretical talking. I'm not an exegete of Revelation.
Yes,
but for me that would be the framework to combine reception history with exegesis. But
for me that was the sense of my last paragraph when I say what can we. I know that we can, as Hegel say, the bird of Minerva rise up at the night. So it's only at the end of the day that you can tell what was the hermeneutical option of someone. But thanks to a Gadamerian approach, I can say that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can say that we are living an early historical critical perspective now, and I can have hint to interpret that, but I can't go. I can't tell the future, and I'm not sure that I'm right. But for me, it's so different. The interpretation of today is so different from the interpretation of the 30 previous years that it's for me the way to try to be outside my position and have a very difficult position in not outside myself, but in somewhere outside myself. But maybe I didn't understand the Gadamer correctly.
Let's go back to Christian here. He put out two questions here. I'll read it out and maybe you could keep your questions short. We still have questions from Tobias and Emanuela and Luke in that order. So, I have two questions from Christian Cardozo. Usually people emphasize Irenaeus' reading of the beast in Against Heresies 530. But what he says in 529.2 is often ignored. He says that that 666 represents the recapitulation of evil in the Antichrist. He alludes to the 600 years of Noah in the deluge and the 66 cubits from the height of the statue in Daniel 3. He mixes up those numbers to say that the Antichrist recapitulates all evil in history. He is kind of the epitome evil. This seems to be a more symbolic interpretation. Do you have any thoughts on that? And then I guess the second, any thoughts on that? And then we can go to the next one. No, actually, sorry, okay. Everybody else knew that with me. Do you have, also, why do you think this symbolic interpretation was forgotten by later interpreters that seem to take only what he says about 666 being possibly names or titles? For example, the Scholia and Apocalypsing, Ecumenes, Andrew.
Yes. For me, it's simple to answer this, the last part of the question. I think they all resist to previous futurist interpretation. When you read Irenaeus, you understand that he was not the first to interpret Apocalypse, Revelation, and that he tried to resist this futuristic interpretation. And I think that yeah, the Ecumenes and the Andrew and they do the same. So, and for me, Irenaeus is very ambiguous, and I think that the commentators after him try to destroy this ambiguity, and the most simple way to do that is to stick to these names. Here you are sure that it's a sort of monogram of evil, and you are not you don't try to interpret as someone or as something. It's my guess, but there is people.
Let's get to the second question, maybe offline, because I know you guys are in touch. Tobias,
you can, if there's not so much time, I talk too much usually.
Yeah. So
Emanuela?
the question I thinking about something, because I really think that the interpretation of 666, as you said, if I learned it, is already linked to the history of reception of revelation, because I have the idea that this topic has also an independent development,
Yes.
especially in modern and contemporary
Yes.
beliefs. And this happened already in the past. I mean, for the Antichrist depiction and figure description, or for the millennialism interpretation. So I don't know if it is correct to say that the history of an apocalyptic motive is always the same that the apocalypse reception is.
Yeah. I'm fully convinced by what you say, and for me, because I've tried to understand, but it was too long for this presentation, why our modernity reads in 666 the number of Satan, and why it was so popular, and now it's a kind of monogram of any satanic power, any satanic person, for instance, in the Omen. Maybe one of, I'm not sure it's the only one, but one of the cause or the person who is responsible for that, it's Aleister Crowley. You know, the famous Satanist who called himself the Beast 666. And so I think that popular culture, it's like a plant. You take the plant without the roots and you plant it in another context. And for me, we are in this popular use of 666. We are more in Aleister Crowley's world than in apocalyptic or Johannine world. You agree?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting observation. Let's go now, if you could keep it quick.
No, that was more a comment. Thank you for your presentation, but I wanted to jump in the discussion with Thomas to say that also in your discussion with Christina Eugenholz on Gadamer, it's no longer Gadamer, but it's more because you are saying Gadamer and Wirkungsgeschichte, and then we switch to English, and we go with the history of reception.
Yeah.
So we are mixing up at least three concepts,
Yes.
with the Kritik and Auslegungsgeschichte, Wirkungsgeschichte, and then Kritik, Wirkungsgeschichte. And I wanted to answer in the same way that you said that the example or the third line that you give in your conclusion in the social scientific approaches. I think this is also what is interesting now, that this is no longer the effect of the text, but this is the Sitzimleben of the readers of the
Yeah.
text who is influencing these new lines. And so my question is, do you agree that maybe also the context that now the symbolic reading of 666
Yes.
is coming back thanks to other social scientific approaches, or also the post-colonial readings? Because for the Book of Revelation, they came a bit like daring more
Yes.
how to read the text, it's just in our context. And now it allowed other historical, critical exegetes to go back to the symbolic readings of the Book of Revelation.
I have nothing to add. I do agree. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, as you say, it's not a question, it's a comment. I do agree. Yeah.
So it's very rare that you get consensus on the question of 666. Let's stop here and stop the discussion. I simply want to thank everyone for being here late on a Thursday, a surprising amount of energy in the room. And for everyone who joined us online today, I think we're up to about 32 for a while. But before we go, we have two more seminar sessions this term or this academic year. And that the next one would be Tobias Nicholas, who will be talking about the Bamberg apocalypse. This is on the 11th of April. So in 3 weeks, he is just to my left, and we're looking forward to this happening. And then on May the 2nd, we have the final seminar of the season by Dr. Martina Vercesi from Glasgow, who will be talking about imagining the end of the world, early Christian interpretations of Revelation 19 through 21. And I think she'll be focusing on North Africa, but maybe she'll be broadening that. She's here on the call right now, somewhere there she is. So we're looking very forward to both of these talks, and we hope that many of you can join us. Also, as a reminder, Tobias's will be live. It will be a hybrid event. So here, I don't know if there will be.
And my text is almost finished
You're
already.
typing on the finish. I aspire to be finished with my next 3 weeks ahead of time. And for those of you who aren't here, thanks for joining us. For those of you who are here, we have something delicious from Belgium. And it is the Belgians are smiling here. We have a Duvel beer, and you will just be sure to read the label, and it will be an appropriate ending to this good talk. Thank you very much. Very interesting.